My name is Nathan Regan, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Economic Development at Invest Atlanta. Invest Atlanta is a City of Atlanta's economic development agency. We're taking some time out of our Tuesday mornings to highlight businesses within the city that have done a tremendous job at pivoting during the COVID-19 pandemic. We had such an overwhelming response from our first companies that we're moving to Tuesday Talk Two-A-Days. That's a lot of T's at one time, where we'll interview two businesses, the first at 10 a.m. and the second at 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday. If you tuned in last week, you know that we had such a great conversation with Jared from East Pole Coffee. We're going to be talking today to an amazing entrepreneur who's well known to the city, Craig Moore, who is the co-founder of Old Fourth Distillery. In 2002, he and his brother, Jeff Moore, set out to open the first distillery in Atlanta since 1906, planting roots in the Old Fourth Ward community. These serial entrepreneurs began bottling sustainable vodka, gin, and most recently their award-winning bourbon. Aside from that, Old Fourth Distillery is committed to giving back to the community that has supported them. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Craig, Jeff, and the entire Old Fourth staff have been working on creating hand sanitizer, first starting on filling the gap in the community to now moving to providing hand sanitizer to the frontline workers that work so tirelessly to keep us all safe. On a personal note, Craig has just been doing such an amazing job. They are now distributing their hand sanitizer nationally, and I'm sure they're going to tell more about their story about how they pivoted so quickly. And this is what we want to highlight on our Tuesday Talks, how local businesses are really taking the COVID-19 pandemic and turning it into an opportunity to grow their business, so much so that even Craig has been hiring people to help with the new demand for their hand sanitizer. So today's format will be a live format and a conversation forum. Craig will be chatting with our Assistant Director of Business Retention and Expansion, Sabrina Wright. If you have any comments or questions for Craig, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to leave some time at the end to have them answered. Craig, thank you for spending time with us today, and congratulations on being able to pivot during this time. And I'll turn it over to you guys now. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning, Craig. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us today in our Tuesday Talk at Invest Atlanta. Again, as Nathan stated, I'm Sabrina Wright, Assistant Director of Business Retention, Expansion, and Workforce Programs at Invest Atlanta. And again, we just welcome you to our Tuesday Talk, and thank you for joining us today and for agreeing to share some of your story with the viewers and listeners here in the city of Atlanta. Nathan provided a bit of a background about you and Old Fourth Ward, but if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Old Fourth Distillery, and also why you chose Atlanta to start your business?
Sure, yeah. As Nathan mentioned, my brother and I we've owned businesses together, actually really dating back to when we were kids, when we were mowing lawns. So we've always been entrepreneurs together, with me running point on a lot of the sales efforts and him doing a lot of the behind the scenes work. So we actually started our first real company back in 2006, which was our technology company selling ruggedized notebook computers, the Panasonic Toughbook, to federal government, state and local, as well as federal government subcontractors. In 2012, actually, we had the idea to bring Atlanta its first distillery since 1906, and that was a function of one of our other businesses is residential and commercial real estate. And my brother owns a property over in East Atlanta that's sort of an event space. It's an auto garage that was converted into an event space. And we were doing events throughout kind of 2010, 11, early 2012, and we were being approached by a lot of the microbreweries that were offering free beer as a way to promote their upstart breweries, but also to help us out with our events. And we just had the idea one night, let's reach out to a local distillery and maybe do something similar, potentially have a house brand whiskey or gin or whatever the case may be. And That's when we started investigating, and we realized that Atlanta proper hadn't had a legal functioning distillery since 1906, when the R.M. Rose Company closed its doors during really the precursor to federal prohibition. So we set out, I will say somewhat naively, to open a distillery. It took us a couple of years, but we launched our first product to the market, which was our vodka product in late 2014, and have since launched our gin and bourbon and another flavored liqueur called Lawn Dart. So it's been quite a journey, but one that's been really rewarding. And we chose Atlanta because, well, we grew up in Atlanta, right? So I mean, my brother and I grew up in Dunwoody, Georgia, and we've always had, even if we've moved away and lived other places, our family's here and our roots are here. So Atlanta has held a special place in our hearts, and in particular, in town Atlanta and the neighborhood of Old Fourth Ward, where we really got our start as business owners and real estate investors. So we thought, what better place than what we feel is now one of the culinary and cultural capitals of the city to open a distillery. But luckily we had a bit of foresight to understand that the BeltLine was going to be one of the more transformative things to hit Atlanta for, in decades. And that really turned out to be very true, especially for the East Side and Old Fourth Ward.
You're absolutely right. So distilleries, breweries are really popular in Metro Atlanta now. And because that was your business, tell us how your business was impacted by the COVID pandemic and how you were able to pivot during this time.
Yeah, so, I can tell you that 6 weeks ago, roughly, my brother and I were really concerned, right? I mean, I was looking back at some of our texts sort of in preparation for this interview, and we were really worried, right? I mean, we've spent the better part of 7 years developing relationships with bars, restaurants, and liquor stores, and we have 700 to 1,000 purchasing accounts across the state, and a full half of those are bars and restaurants. So when we started to see the fact that a lot of those customers were going to close, and let's face it, some might never reopen. We hope that that's not the case, but we have to be realistic here. We were really worried, but we also wanted to stay busy and do what we could for the community. And that's when we saw that a distillery out in Washington State, with Seattle being one of the original epicenters of COVID-19, this distillery was making hand sanitizer out of what amounts to pure alcohol. This is pure ethanol, which is 95% pure alcohol, which is the foundation for a lot of spirits like vodka and gin. We call it neutral spirit. And we saw that they were doing that. So we were like, hey, let's order 5 or 10 gallons of aloe on Amazon. And we have some of this high proof spirit sitting around. Let's make some and give it to our friends and neighbors. And so we did that, and we had quite the line outside of the distillery with people bringing in whatever container they could find, water bottles or old hand sanitizer bottles. You actually be kind of surprised some of the containers people brought in, but we were filling people's containers, and that caught the attention of some local news outlets, and then the lines got bigger. And then that story caught the attention of some larger media outlets like CNN and CBS Evening News. And then all of a sudden, I'm not kidding, 10,000 voicemails and emails from agencies and corporations and individuals across the country begging us to make and sell them hand sanitizer. It was never our intention really to turn this into a business or sell it. We were taking very small donations from people who would pick up hand sanitizer in the beginning, but we kind of quickly realized what opportunity lay in front of us, and that's when we pivoted. And I can just tell you, in 6 weeks, we went from making 10 gallons in an 1,100 square foot distillery on Edgewood Avenue in Old Fourth Ward to making 10,000 gallons a week in a 50,000 square foot building on Boulder Crest Road in East Atlanta. So it's been quite the journey. 18-hour days really for the first month. Things have gotten a little easier now. Just we've ironed out a lot of the supply chain and logistical hurdles and issues, but it's been really an unbelievable process for sure.
There are a lot of businesses that are suffering during this time, and they've had to lay off, cut back hours for their employees, and furlough people. How have you handled that with your staff? What were your staffing numbers prior to the COVID pandemic, and what are they now, and how has that changed for you?
Yeah, for the distillery, we're a small business, so we had a total of around 10 folks, and that was a combination of some part-time people as well as some full-time, about half and half. And a lot of those part-time folks are people who worked in our tasting room. So this was tours and tastings at the distillery Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And that was the first thing that we knew we were going to have to cut back on. And so we closed the tasting room for tours and tastings. But as the hand sanitizer business ramped up, we realized that we were not only going to be able to keep all of our full-time W-2 employees fully paid with no furloughs or pay cuts, but that we would also have the opportunity to pay all of those hourly employees, not just their normal hourly rate, but what they normally would have made with tips. So we said to them, look, here's what you've made on average over the last 6 months. We're going to pay you guys in many cases just to sit at home, because we're actually kind of running a skeleton crew, and we're utilizing some third-party logistics and co-packing facilities to actually bottle this stuff, because that's the most labor-intensive part of what we're doing. So we've got some employees that we've said, hey, stay at home, be safe. You're going to get, this hourly wage that really covers what you normally would have made. So, every once in a while, I want to curl up into a fetal position because I'm busier than I've ever been in my entire life. But then I have to give thanks to the fact that we are busy, we are generating revenue, and our employees are being paid, and they can pay their rent and their expenses and not have to worry about it. So if I start complaining even for a second, I quickly reset and recalibrate.
Right. That is amazing. That's amazing. And I congratulate you on that, the opportunity to just keep your staffing and also be able to pay those who are staying at home right now. That's very important during this time, especially considering the job losses that are occurring just across the country. So I know that because you're now producing hand sanitizers, who are some of your customers now, and how has that worked for you? I know you mentioned that you got a lot of attention from local media and then some of the national media as well. And how did that impact your sales, and who are your existing customers now?
Yeah, so two of our initial large customers were the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, right? That's our Georgia version of FEMA. GEMA. And so they were a large customer for us to begin with. And what was great about that was we were working with City of Atlanta and Fulton County and DeKalb County and just a bunch of other divisions of local government. And it was challenging for us to supply them with 5 gallons or a gallon or this or that, because just the transactional volume was difficult. We didn't have the bandwidth to deal with that. So GEMA sort of stepped in and said, look, sell us a really large quantity, and we will handle the distribution out to the literally hundreds of state and local agencies that need this stuff. So they were an initial customer for us. The other one that was really impactful for us was the relationship with Southern Company. And, that's Southern Company Gas, it used to be Atlanta Gas, Georgia Power, Alabama Power. And they took a really big chance on us in that, they came to us initially and said, hey, will you make us 10,000 bottles of hand sanitizer? And of course, me being the consummate salesperson, I was like, sure, not knowing what I was getting myself into at all. But they took a huge chance on us, actually paid us up front for a bunch of product that we, hadn't
Wow.
delivered bottle one of. And it went all the way up to the CEO of Southern Company, and he asked, this is the first time this has ever happened in my life, that we increase our price so that we could cover credit card processing fees, because that's how they were paying us to get us the money, most as fast as they could. So I've never heard of a CEO care about credit card processing fees for a small vendor, but he did, which is pretty telling. So Southern Company's been just an incredible partner for us. Comcast has been another great partner for us. And it's been quite a journey. My customers were Greens and Tower and bars and restaurants across the state, and now they're Comcast and Southern Company and UPS and Delta. So it's been quite a crazy 6 weeks for sure.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So you've created this brand with your particular focus on the Old Fourth Ward community. How do you think the Old Fourth Distillery has handled the shift to manufacturing hand sanitizers, a product that you're not typically known for? And do you feel that this has strengthened your ties to that community?
I had a little bit of a hard time hearing that whole question, but the amazing thing has been the the attention that we've gotten for making hand sanitizer, and this is true of whether these are consumers or even liquor stores, bars, and restaurants that we hope to count as our customers when this is all over with, has been unbelievable. We've never seen our social media platforms get this type of attention before. So it's been really incredible to witness and see the support from the community. And we hope that when things get back to normal, someone like Delta Airlines, as a really great example, has been buying hand sanitizer from us, and they've essentially said, look, when this is all said and done, we'd like to further partner with you guys so that your traditional products can be a bigger part of our on-plane experience and the experience in Sky Club. So that just in and of itself would be monumental for us, right? I mean, Sweetwater, that's one of the ways that Sweetwater became a national brand, was because of their partnership with Delta. So we're certainly hoping to leverage this as we move forward and take advantage of the good PR and good mojo that we've developed here with what we're doing with the hand sanitizer product.
So speaking of good PR, Invest Atlanta focuses a lot on the community, whether it be businesses, residents, and just all of Atlanta. And we love to hear about things that companies may be doing to give back to the community. So is Old Fourth Distillery doing anything to partner with the community? And can you describe some of that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's how this all started, right? So when we started, we were accepting very small donations from people who would come to get their bottles of hand sanitizer filled up. And that's how we were funding the operation. What we quickly realized was that hand sanitizer is expensive to make, and we are not a hand sanitizer manufacturer. In fact, the ingredients that we're using are far more expensive than what Purell or BioLab would use. And so we kind of realized pretty fast that this would be pretty difficult to sustain with donations, but the partnerships with the government agencies and large corporations that I described earlier has allowed us to continue donating really large amounts of hand sanitizer to homeless shelters and at-risk populations, and those nonprofits that have a real critical mission during all of this. But really can't afford to pay market rates. So we've really been able to accelerate that effort through the help of our corporate and government partners.
That's great. It's great to hear that you're helping out with homeless shelters and assisting with giving back to the community in that way. So again, because other businesses are having a difficult time, or some are still thriving throughout this in different ways because they're being creative and having to pivot in various ways, what advice do you have for other businesses during this time? And what do you think the business community can do to become and stay resilient and sustainable through this pandemic?
Yeah, so I mentioned our other company, the technology business, and again, we were concerned about all of our businesses not knowing exactly what the situation was going to look like. And my brother-in-law runs that tech business, and I texted him very early on, and I said, think about what types of products and services our technology company can provide to and from our existing customer base, and how we can pivot to really adapt during this time. So that's certainly a suggestion that I would have for any company out there listening to this, that think about adapting, because in a lot of cases, the first instinct, and this was my instinct as well, this isn't a criticism of anyone, is to think, well, this is terrible. I need to hunker down and really pull back. And I think there are many companies that, if they adapt and sort of overcome that initial fear, can really turn it into something positive. And just a word about Invest Atlanta. Invest Atlanta supported us from day one, right? So going back to 2012, before we even had SBA funding to buy equipment, Invest Atlanta was there with their Phoenix Fund, and providing us with low interest, essentially subsidized loans, in an easy way, right? I mean, the complexity of those applications were just far less than what you're going to find with your traditional SBA loan. And I encourage people to explore the programs that Invest Atlanta has to offer. Cynthia Freeman and Lonnie Sabor, those are folks that I've worked with and developed really strong friendships and relationships with over nearly this past decade. I just can't speak highly enough of the men and women that work for Invest Atlanta, and their mission to support small business in the city. They do a great job at it. So, that was one aspect of what has helped us, not only during our traditional business cycle, but during this time as well. But there's another loan that we ended up getting, a far bigger loan, to purchase a building that serves as our logistical hub in Old Fourth Ward. It's over there on Decatur Street, right between the King of Pops manufacturing facility and the Fetch Dog Park. Both other great companies here in the city of Atlanta. King of Pops are great friends of ours, as well as the Fetch founders and owners. Both of which probably invested, and actually I know have benefited from Invest Atlanta. So it's funny to see that little stretch of DeKalb Avenue, what those three businesses have done. But anyway, they gave us Invest Atlanta through the Advantage New Markets tax credit subsidized loan fund, helped us purchase that building, and gave us some funds to actually do the remodel and rehab on that building as well. So we've been touched by the Invest Atlanta mission several times during our company's life cycle. So I just can't say enough about that process, and would encourage people to explore those options.
Mm-hmm. So we do have a few questions coming in on our chat, and I want to go ahead and ask some of those so that our listeners are getting some of the answers they're looking for as well. And one that keeps popping up is about your supply chain, and how has that been affected right now?
Yeah, so we've just had to pivot our supply chain. At first, we were using beverage grade alcohol, right? So what we're doing is following the WHO and CDC guidelines for the emergency production of hand sanitizer, right? Which is using isopropyl or ethyl alcohol in our case at least 70%. We try to trend more towards a 75% alcohol. And then you use denaturing agents like glycerin and hydrogen peroxide to make sure, quite frankly, that the alcohol that is beverage grade cannot be consumed, which is a bigger problem than you might expect, especially in the homeless population, unfortunately. So when the TTB, which is the Tax and Trade Bureau, the overseeing regulatory body for distilleries and breweries across the country, they issued an edict saying that distilleries could manufacture hand sanitizer on an emergency basis. When they did that, there was an unprecedented run on the suppliers of this high proof alcohol across the country. And then you started to see entrants into the marketplace like Budweiser and Tito's, for example, that started to really peel away a lot of the product that small producers like ourselves were relying on to make products. So, you know, we had to shift very quickly to add 4 or 5 different sources of that raw ingredient to our supply chain. And you know, once you solve something like that, then you move on to packaging, which has been an incredibly difficult issue for us, where we've tried to standardize on plastic bottles ranging from 8 ounces all the way up to, you know, 270-gallon totes. Packaging has been a tremendous challenge, and we've been lucky to have some good partners who have been scouring the packaging world for us and helping us get, you know, 100,000 bottles here and 50,000 bottles there. And so it has been really, really difficult, and it remains so today for sure.
I understand you, with all of your commercial customers that you're working with right now, do you offer online services, or are you selling things online for just regular businesses, local businesses, and or local residents who want to purchase hand sanitizers?
Right.
Like how
So we are not selling this product online, and primarily the reason for that is we're not really set up to sell individual bottles to individual consumers. And what would happen is if we put a store up online, we would probably get overrun by consumers who want to purchase, you know, 1 or 2 bottles, and we're simply not set up logistically to take those types of orders. And what we encourage people to do, quite frankly, is, you know, follow the advice of the CDC and stay at home. If you don't have to come out, please don't. Wash your hands. There's no substitute for washing your hands with soap and hot water. Hand sanitizer is not a shield that's going to protect you against COVID-19. It is something to be used in situations where you cannot wash your hands. So that's a message that I'd like to get out there. Now, having said all that, we are at a point where we can take smaller orders. And when I say smaller orders, we're talking, you know, 5 or 10 gallons. And generally we are trying to focus on still public safety and first line of defense type people. So small medical facilities. When you start thinking about people like Comcast and Southern Company, well, they have to keep the internet going, right? They have to keep the lights on. Amazon has purchased from us. They have to keep that supply chain of essential goods rolling. So we're focused on those types of customers right now. If there are those out in the community that feel that they sort of, I don't want to say qualify, but if they're in that situation, you can email us at info@o4d.com. That's the letter O, the number 4, the letter D, as in David.com. And if we have the ability and it looks like something that would really help our community, we can you know, take a look at whether we'd be able to supply you.
And one final question. I know we're running short on time, but we just want to thank you for all that you're doing in the Atlanta community. We appreciate your business so much. And because you've now shifted to hand sanitizers, what do you see as the new normal for your business and moving out of this COVID pandemic?
Yeah, that is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and of course, I've had the opportunity to speak with government agencies, healthcare professionals, large corporations that like Home Depot, for example, that have to spend real analytical, resources to think about the situation. And I am concerned about opening things up too quickly. I do think that the social distancing and the measures that we've taken have helped. And it's what worries me, and I'm in the same situation, right? People kind of get to a point where they just throw their hands up and say, I can't do this anymore. I can't just be alone and not have social contact, and I'm just going to take the risk. And the problem is, for most of us, that's not a problem. But it's the people who have underlying health conditions that puts them at risk. So I think we all need to be cognizant of that. But the new normal from a business perspective, it's tough to say, right? I mean, again, some of our bar and restaurant customers might never reopen, right? So we spent so much time developing those relationships. So we have to think about when our hand sanitizer business sort of wanes, which it will, and we're pragmatic about that. What does it look like for us to start rebuilding those relationships and those customers over the next couple of years? Because unfortunately, I think this is a couple of year type thing where the next time we see a full Falcon Stadium, that might be 2022, quite frankly. But I'm just guessing, so I don't have any better answers than anyone else listening here.
Right. Well, Craig, thank you again for all your work here in Atlanta. Thanks to everyone who's joined us today. We'll be sharing this broadcast to our Invest Atlanta YouTube and saving it to our Facebook page as well. You can find Old Fourth Distillery at their website, as Craig stated, o4d.com. You can also find them on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Old Fourth. And we just, again, thank you so much. And we're hoping that your business continues to be successful here in the city. And we look forward to everyone joining us for another Tuesday talk at 11:30 a.m. today. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me.